Hello, I'm David Burrows and I am a fantasy author. I've written a trilogy, The Prophecy of the Kings. The trilogy comprises Legacy of the Eldrick, Dragon Rider and Shadow of the Demon. Today I'm going to read sample chapters from Drachar's Demons, which is set 500 years prior to the period of The Prophecy of the Kings. This is the book Drachar's Demons, and you can find this and sample chapters from my other books on my website davidburrows.org.uk. There you'll also find reviews from the books and sample chapters. Please feel free to have a look and browse. Thank you. Hello again, and this is the sample chapter from Drachar's Demons. Turrell hugged the wall, peering cautiously around the corner. "Can you see him?" Cheryl asked. "Shh!" Turrell cautioned. He stepped back from the corner, looking pensive. Cheryl felt a thrill of fear. "Well," she prompted. "He stopped, just around the corner. I think he saw me." At any other time, Turrell's expression would have made her laugh. He looked so afraid. She felt afraid too. Afraid, but also more alive somehow. It was as though her fear was feeding her strength. Suddenly someone stepped into the street. He was coming around the same corner Turrell had peered around moments before. He was a tall man. Cheryl had to squint against the glare of the sun before she could see him clearly. It was the man they were following. Gastrin, a soldier dressed in chainmail, was wearing a helmet and carrying a long sword strapped to his side. "Why are you following me?" Gastrin demanded, glancing from one to the other. His gaze was firm. He looked unafraid. But then again, why should he fear them? Two civilians, one small woman, the other an unarmed man. Cheryl felt a growing sense of excitement. "Because you stole from us," she spat. "You calling me a thief?" the soldier said, a hand going to the hilt of his sword. "I know you. You are from his special school. Go back before you get into trouble." Cheryl looked to Turrell for support, but he was looking away, too afraid to meet the soldier's gaze. Cheryl was angry, and she wasn't going to let this rest. A thud of wood on stone from above sounded as someone opened the shutter. It was flung wider by a sudden gust of wind. She saw a face peering down on them, wondering no doubt what the noise was about. Cheryl felt alive. She giggled. "We're not leaving until you give us the gold. And yes, I am calling you a thief," Cheryl shouted, moving away from Turrell. "Cheryl," Turrell started. "It's not worth it. Let's go back." He held his arm out to her, as though imploring her to come with him. "I'm not leaving without the gold," she insisted. This pretty boy soldier had better give it back. "Listen to the little man," the soldier advised, his manner confident as he shrugged his head towards Turrell. "Go back to the school, before I get annoyed." He turned away. To be dismissed so lightly made Cheryl doubly angry. At that moment she hated this conceited man with a passion. Before she could do anything, Turrell finally overcame his cowardice. "Little man!" Turrell blared. He shoved the man in the back, catching him off balance. The soldier took a couple of long strides before bringing himself to a halt. "I am not a little man, and you should show some respect, Gastrin." "Thief! I saw how you looked when Drachar gave the gold to me. I saw your eyes, and they betrayed you." Gastrin spun around, whipping out his sword, his eyes blazing furiously. Others were coming to the windows of the buildings overlooking the narrow street to see what the commotion was about. Gastrin looked up, and seeing the watching faces, he lowered his blade, clearly aware that there were witnesses watching. "Go back to school," he sneered, "and I will pretend this didn't happen." He backed up several paces, sheathing his sword. "We want our gold," Cheryl shouted, following him. "Cheryl, watch out," Turrell warned, reaching out to grab her arm. She shrugged out of reach and stormed towards Gastrin, who backed farther away, glancing up at the watchers. Turning the corner, he started walking away from the pair. Cheryl ran after him, stooped and picked up a stone, which she hurled with all her strength. It hit Gastrin in the back. Once again, he spun around to confront them, drawing his sword more slowly this time. "I am warning you two," he said through gritted teeth, pointing the sword at them and jabbing it in their direction. His face was crimson with fury. "Cheryl," Turrell said. Cheryl glanced back at him, seeing in his look that he wanted to leave. "I want our gold," she insisted. "Cheryl, no!" Turrell cried out as she started to trace a rune in the air. Turrell copied her. Cheryl guessed that he was casting a spell of protection, a wise precaution. Gastrin laughed at them, fingers painting his own patterns in the air in mockery. He turned to leave, and that infuriated Cheryl all the more. With a final flourish, she finished her casting and roared aloud, "Gastrin!" The other man glanced over his shoulder in time to see a green glow emanating from a tear in the fabric between the worlds. His face darkened as a creature bounded forth. He spun around, his sword drawn. His eyes were wide with fear as he sought an escape. An imp hovered in the air between Cheryl and Gastrin. It didn't look too menacing. It was no bigger than a fox, but the smell and green glow were telltale signs of what it was. A demon. "Kill him," Cheryl commanded, pointing at Gastrin, who raised his sword, clearly not wanting to turn his back on the imp. The imp was fast. It threw itself at Gastrin, who thrust his sword outwards. His blow was ill-timed and clearly made in haste. The imp simply dodged the blow and was upon him. Its talons raked his throat, then it was past him, landing cat-like on its talons. Gastrin's hand clutched his throat. Blood gushed through his fingers. Desperately, he tried to staunch the flow, his eyes bulging in their sockets. He tried to say something, but blood gurgled from his lips. He fell to his knees, a look of astonishment on his face. The imp was not yet finished. Gastrin knew it was behind him, and he tried desperately to turn to face it. The creature leapt on his back, its claws tearing at his mail as though it was nothing more than silk. Gastrin's head snapped back. A wail escaped his lips as the imp sought his soul. With a cry of victory, the imp snatched its talons from within his back. Cheryl cast a rune, sending it back to hell. A smile on her lips as she looked upon Gastrin's corpse. A great hole had been ripped in his back. "Cheryl, what have you done?" Turrell said. He looked at her in awe, his mouth agape. "Get the gold," Cheryl instructed, waving a hand dismissively. Turrell smiled. "You were brilliant. Summoning an imp so quickly." "Just get the gold," she said, pointing at the body. She glanced up at the windows. Several slammed shut as the occupants withdrew, unwilling to get involved after witnessing the horror and violence just perpetrated. A few looked on still, their faces masked in terror. When Turrell turned the body over, even Cheryl was taken aback. Gastrin's face was frozen in a silent scream, a look of complete terror permanently etched on his face. Cheryl had never liked him, even though she'd only met him a few weeks earlier. He was a typical soldier, thinking he was better than anyone else just because he had a sword. She looked up, unafraid of anyone seeing her. She had power now, and no one could touch her, not ever again. "I have it," Turrell announced excitedly, crouching over the body and staring at the nugget. He held it up for her to see. "I have it," he repeated. "Come on, we'd better get back," Cheryl said. She felt incredible, vibrant. She couldn't stop smiling. "What would people do?" Turrell fretted. You killed him." "Do? What can they do?" Cheryl said, smiling. "We are invincible." I do hope you enjoyed that. Please visit my website, davidburrows.org.uk. And as I say, have a look at some of the sample chapters and reviews on my books. Thank you for visiting my site. Good reading.